So we've got this really interesting discussion. It's a recording, actually, from a bunch of DJs and sound professionals. And
Yeah.
I thought it'd be interesting to kind of pick it apart and see what we could learn about
So,
sound systems and,
yeah,
how to scale sound for different size events.
that's a great idea. And I think there's a lot to unpack there because we're talking about anything from
Right.
a small wedding
Yeah.
to a huge festival.
Exactly.
So I'm excited to kind of dive in and hear what these guys have to say.
Yeah, and see what we can learn,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, so just to kind of reiterate, the goal here is to figure out how these guys match their sound equipment to the scale of the event.
Right.
And I think they're going to have some really interesting insights because they've seen everything from these really small, intimate gatherings
Yeah.
to, these massive events with thousands of people.
Yeah, one guy's talking about a wedding reception, and then the next guy's talking about,
Right.
like, a massive festival.
A festival.
It's
Wow.
wild.
Yeah, it is really cool to hear the differences and see how they adapt.
Totally.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin? Like, when you're thinking about how to set up sound for an event,
Right.
what's the
Where do you start?
what's the first thing you need to figure out?
Well, it seems like the number of guests really matters.
Okay.
And especially when we're talking about weddings, it seems like this is how these professionals figure out their pricing and how they're going
Okay.
to choose their equipment.
Yeah.
At least initially.
Got it.
One of the guys in this discussion, Buddy, he actually said that he has different pricing tiers based on the number of guests.
Oh, wow.
So he has like under 80, under 130, under 180, and then higher.
So he has these kind of like benchmarks that
Yeah.
affect.
Yeah, these are thresholds that he uses to
Wow.
decide how much he's going to charge.
Interesting.
And it's not just arbitrary. It's because these are the points where he's going to need to start using different equipment.
Right. More speakers, more
Exactly.
amps, more.
Exactly. He needs bigger equipment as the guest count goes up.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
The bigger the crowd, the bigger the sound that you
Yeah,
need.
you got to reach everybody.
You got to reach everybody.
Yeah.
So I was really fascinated by this sound couple
Mm-hmm.
that was part of the discussion.
Yeah, they were great.
They were talking about how they focused their sound at weddings, specifically on the dance floor perimeter.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such an interesting approach because they're not trying to fill the entire room with sound.
Right.
They're being very targeted.
Yeah, it's a really smart strategy, I think, because they're recognizing that the people on the dance floor are the ones who need that really powerful, clear sound.
Right. They want to feel the music.
Exactly.
Not just hear it.
And they don't want to overpower the conversations that are happening elsewhere in the room.
Right. So you might have like a quiet dinner going on
Exactly.
in one area and then a crazy dance party in another.
Yeah, it's about putting the sound where it's needed most.
I like that.
Yeah.
Putting the sound where it's needed most. That should be like our tagline for this episode. All right. So they also talked about how important it is to know the venue.
Yes.
Or at least
Absolutely.
visit it beforehand.
You can't just rely on the number of guests. You also have to think about the space itself.
Right.
Because the acoustics are going to be different everywhere you go.
Totally. You could have 150 people in a small room and it would sound completely different than 150 people in this giant hall
Exactly.
or outside.
Yeah, and even the materials that the room is made of are going to affect how the sound travels.
Right.
So it's not just about the number of people, it's also about the physical space.
And they brought up another really interesting point, which is the energy level of the audience.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Because they were saying you could have a small crowd that's super high energy and they're going to push your sound system harder
Right.
than you might expect.
It's unpredictable sometimes.
Totally. So how do you even plan for that?
Yeah. I think experience plays a big role here.
Okay.
These guys have been doing this for a long time, so they kind of have a feel for it.
Okay.
But generally speaking, it's a good idea to have a little bit more headroom in your system.
What does that mean?
It means that you don't want to be pushing your equipment to its absolute limit.
Okay.
You want to have a little bit of extra power in reserve
Got it.
so that if the crowd gets really wild,
Yeah.
you can handle it without sacrificing sound quality or risking equipment failure.
So it's kind of like having a buffer.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So let's talk about the actual gear.
Yeah, let's get into the nitty-gritty.
What are these guys using for different sized events?
All right, so for smaller gatherings, like under 150 people, we heard a lot about compact portable systems.
Okay.
Buddy mentioned using Maui 5s for smaller weddings,
Okay.
which are these column-style speakers. They're really popular because they're self-contained, and they provide good coverage without taking up a ton of space.
So it's kind of like an all-in-one solution. Yeah. And then Pete actually said that he sometimes prefers to use single-top speakers without subwoofers
Oh,
for
wow.
certain weddings where the focus isn't on heavy bass.
So maybe if it's more of a like a cocktail hour vibe.
Exactly. Or if they're just playing background music during dinner,
Yeah,
you don't necessarily need that thumping bass.
right.
So as the guest list grows, you obviously need more powerful equipment.
Makes sense.
But he used the term big guns to describe what he uses for mid-sized events, like 200 to 400 people.
Okay, so what are the big guns?
Well, it could be larger speaker setups or adding more speakers and subwoofers to
Okay.
make sure that everyone can hear clearly, especially if there's a live band or a DJ playing dance music.
Right, because you need that extra power to cut through the crowd noise. And
Exactly.
the music itself is probably going to be louder.
Right.
Yeah.
Sean actually gave us a specific example of his setup for a wedding with about 360 to 380 guests.
Okay.
He uses 4 top speakers, 2 subwoofers.
And then he uses 2 of those top speakers as side fills.
What are side fills?
So side fills are basically extra speakers that are positioned to the sides of the main sound system.
Okay.
And their purpose is to provide more even sound distribution,
Oh.
especially during the earlier parts of an event like a wedding.
Okay.
So think about cocktail hour dinner speeches.
Right.
People who are seated further to the sides might not be able to hear the main speakers as well.
Got it.
So the side fills help to fill in those gaps.
So it's all about coverage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want everyone to have a good listening experience no matter where they're sitting.
And then when it's time to party.
Right. Then you can turn off the side fills and focus all that energy on the dance floor.
So you're kind of adapting the sound system to the different parts of the event.
Exactly.
I like that. So what about really large events like 500 people or more?
All right, now we're getting into the big leagues.
Yeah.
Chris talked about working on an outdoor festival for 800 students.
Wow.
And for an event like that, you need some serious firepower.
Yeah, I bet.
You're talking about powerful speaker arrays, which are basically multiple speakers working together
Okay.
to project sound over a large area.
Got it.
And there's a lot of logistical planning involved, especially when you're dealing with an outdoor space.
Right, because you have to think about things like wind and weather.
Absolutely. You have to make sure that the sound is going to reach everyone and that the equipment is protected from the elements.
And then you have Pete's story about that 12,500 person school fundraiser.
Oh, yeah, that's insane.
That's a whole other level.
At that scale, you're talking about professional sound reinforcement companies.
Okay.
You might have flown speaker arrays, multiple subwoofers, a whole team of technicians.
Wow.
It's a huge production.
So the basic principles are the same. You still want good coverage and clarity,
Right.
but the execution's totally different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a whole different ballgame when you're dealing with that many people.
Okay, so one thing that came up in the discussion was this shift from passive to powered speaker systems.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Can you explain what that means?
Sure. So traditionally, exactly.
Okay.
But on the flip side, powered speakers are often more reliable overall
Okay, that makes sense.
because the components are designed to work together.
Got it.
They also talked about the lost art of designing passive speaker racks.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like it was a real skill.
Yeah.
Matching the amplifiers to the speakers, managing all the cables.
Yeah, it was a lot more hands-on.
Exactly.
Right.
But even with powered speakers, you still need to know how to cable things properly.
Right.
Buddy mentioned that he still uses speaking cables,
Oh, okay.
which are these really robust connectors,
Huh.
even with some of the newer array systems.
So some things never go out of style.
Right. The
So-
fundamentals are still important.
So let's talk about lighting,
Okay, let's switch gears.
because that's another huge part of creating the right atmosphere for an event.
Absolutely. And just like with sound, you need to scale your lighting to the size of the event.
Right.
The sound couple said that they focus on lighting the dance floor and any performance areas. But when you have a larger crowd, not everyone is going to be on the dance floor at the same time.
Right.
So you need to think about how to provide enough coverage for those areas without overwhelming the rest of the venue.
It's all about balance.
Exactly.
Okay.
Buddy suggested using remote corner lighting.
Okay, what's that?
It's where you place lights further back in the room
Okay.
and you project them onto the dance
Yeah.
floor, kind of like you see at concerts.
Right.
But the sound couple pointed out a couple of potential problems with that.
Okay, like what?
Well, first of all, you need more powerful lights to project over longer distances.
Right.
And they were worried about creating tripping hazards with the cables and stands.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You don't want people tripping over things in the dark.
Safety first.
Exactly.
So what are some other ways to light a large space?
Well, Buddy actually mentioned that he uses Astral light tubes,
Okay.
which are these really cool wireless lights that you can place pretty much anywhere. And he also said that he likes to use existing architectural features like columns to
Okay.
place his lights.
So you're working with the venue.
Exactly.
Got
You're
it.
using what's already there to your advantage.
So we heard about a lot of specific equipment in this discussion.
Yeah, they were name dropping all kinds of brands and models.
It was like a gearhead's dream.
It was really cool to hear what they're actually using in the field.
Totally.
Yeah.
So what were some of the highlights?
Well, Buddy mentioned using DB102 speakers for events around 200 people.
Okay.
And he was thinking about adding side fills for larger gigs.
Okay.
Pete said that he likes to stack extra top speakers instead of relying solely on subwoofers for weddings with about 250 guests.
Okay.
And for those bigger events, he said he has a team to help him with the setup.
Right, because it's too much for one person to handle.
Exactly.
Okay, what else?
Chris used JBL PRX 515s and QSC K12s for that college festival.
Okay.
Those are both really popular powered speakers.
Cool.
Sean uses electro voice speakers for his standard setup under 250 people.
Okay.
And then for larger events, he does custom quotes.
So he tailors his equipment to each specific event.
Exactly.
Okay.
Nathan just bought some QSC speakers.
Oh.
He didn't say which model, though.
Oh, come on. Yeah, give us the details.
Right.
But he did say that he typically uses 4 to 6 top speakers and at least 2 18-inch subwoofers for school dances.
Okay.
And he's thinking about upgrading to dual 18-inch subs from RCF or JBL.
Wow.
So he wants that really powerful bass.
He wants to shake the floor.
Yeah.
Matt, also known as DJ Salsa,
Oh.
uses single 18-inch subs for smaller weddings.
Oh, yeah.
And NXL top speakers for venues where he needs to project the sound further.
Got it.
He also had good things to say about the new QSC KC12 array system,
Okay.
but he thought the subwoofers could be a little bit better.
Okay.
He also mentioned K-Audio subs
Okay.
and some really intense bass boss subwoofers,
Okay.
like DJ Fiesta's 4 dual 18s
Wow.
and the Kraken and Krakatoa models.
Those names sound serious.
They do, like they could cause an earthquake.
Yeah, they're definitely not messing around.
Okay, so what about Brenly? What does he use?
So Brenly talked about his setup for a 425-person wedding at Celebrations on the River.
Okay.
He used 2 speakers near his booth to get better projection,
Okay.
and he had subwoofers on the floor.
Yep.
He was using RCF and LD Systems ICOA speakers.
Okay.
And he said he was still fine-tuning the LD ICOAs.
So even with familiar equipment, there's always room for optimization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he mentioned that he might upgrade his system in the future.
Okay.
So he's always looking for ways to improve.
Cool. And then we had Drain, who's relatively new to doing sound for large weddings,
Right.
but he has experience using existing sound systems in school gyms and churches.
Yeah, he's done sound for talent shows, school programs, church plays.
Okay.
So he's had to work with what's available.
Right.
He mentioned using older PV and EBS speaker systems.
Okay.
So sometimes you have to make do with what you have,
Right.
but he's still able to get the job done.
Then we had Paul joining us all the way from Australia.
Yeah, he was a great addition to the conversation.
He said that he typically does events with under 170 people,
Right.
and he uses LD M28G3 speakers.
Okay.
And he suggested that for smaller gatherings, like 80 to 100 people, you might not even need subwoofers.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it really depends on the situation.
It does.
So it seems like there's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to sound for events.
Right.
It's all about understanding the venue, the audience, the type of event.
And knowing your equipment really well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And having the experience to know what's going to work best in each situation.
Yeah, you need to be able to adapt and make adjustments on the fly.
And of course, there's the whole pricing aspect,
Right.
as we talked about earlier with Buddy's tiered pricing structure.
Yeah, as the equipment needs and the logistical challenges increase,
Right.
the price is going to go up.
That makes sense. Because you're using more gear, you might need more people to help you, and there's more wear and tear on the equipment, so it's all factored into the price.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
All right, so if you're thinking about sound for an event, whether you're hiring someone or doing it yourself,
Right.
the most important thing is to understand the scale of the event,
Okay.
how many people are going to be there, what kind of venue is it, how loud do you need it to be.
Right.
Once you have a good understanding of those factors, you can start to think about the equipment.
Okay.
And there's no one right answer. It's all about finding the right balance for your specific needs.
And it's clear that experience plays a big role.
Absolutely. These professionals have learned through trial and error what works and what doesn't.
So it's always a good idea to consult with someone who knows what they're doing
Yeah, they can help you to avoid costly mistakes.
and make sure that your event sounds amazing.
Exactly.
So this has been a really interesting look into the world of event sound.
Yeah, it's been fun.
But it also raises some new questions.
Oh, like what?
Well, we've talked about how to scale sound for different sized events.
Right.
But what about really unique or unusual spaces?
Oh, yeah.
Like
Sure.
what if you're doing an event in a giant warehouse or a cave or on a mountaintop?
That's a great question.
How do you adapt these principles to those kinds of environments?
I don't know, but I'm curious to find out.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.